Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, and today we are going to discuss a very essential issue in which even an Indian student has been involved. And the topic for today's discussion is criminalizing dissent, the US crackdown on pro Palestinian student protests. And before we start, I would request all of you to like and subscribe and share this video with others. We have a very prominent speaker with us today. His name is Zaid Kanafani. He's an independent journalist who has covered the occupied West Bank since May 2021. He has worked with the Arab American News and Think Civics. He recently decided to take a break from full-time journalism to focus on two of his upcoming novels, but he still regularly publishes news from occupied West Bank and surrounding region on his personal Substack page. He's joining us live from US. And so to start with, sir, we are very thankful for the privilege of your time.
Thank you. It's a privilege. Thank you for the invitation.
Sir, my first question to you is, the crackdown on the student protests in Columbia University and other universities in US happened in 2024 also.
Yes, yeah, that's a lot of what we're seeing that is happening at Columbia. It's not for anything recent. It's because of the protests that took place in April, May, and June of last year. So that's one of the things that are so alarming about this is these students are being targeted over something that happened a year ago.
And the entire, how is the structure of a university in US? I do understand that the tuition costs are high
Yes.
in US, but if a student has paid, has a valid visa, or is a citizen, how can they be deported?
Well, a lot of the students they are particularly targeting are students who are here on a visa or even a green card. And it's just how the United States government works. They can make up whatever they want as they go along. And so what they're saying is part of being here on a visa or a green card is you can't partake in anything that threatens the security of the United States.
When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, as on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities, I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out.
And because they are labeling these protests not as pro-Palestinian, but anti-Israel, then they then fall in that category. And so if you were seen at these protests, you support Hamas and terrorism, and you are a threat to the United States.
But there are a lot of Jewish students also that protest.
Yes, exactly. And this whole, I have here one of the things, the United States government, they just took away over $400 million in grant and contract money to Columbia University. And one of the stipulations to eventually get that money back is they have to redefine their term anti-Semitism. So they have to change all of that in order to get this money back. And of course, I mean, $400 million is a lot of money. So you can understand why their school would be so out to do whatever they have to do to make sure they get that funding back.
And one thing which is at your own personal level, how has the situation since 20th of January changed for you when you are writing about the occupied West Bank or you are trying to create awareness about it?
It has changed everything about everything for me. I actually myself, I was arrested by the FBI. I spent a year in a federal prison over all of this. So it's very close to my heart. And I hurt even more because I think a big problem here in the United States is Americans, if they knew the truth, that they would support Palestinians. It's just so hard to find the truth. We here in America have this reputation of free speech and the freest country in the world. But especially when it comes to what we see on the media, it is so driven by politics. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, the way our media operates is borderline with that. See, growing up, we always heard about how horrible the media is, state-sponsored media in places like Iran and Russia and North Korea, and I'm sure it's absolutely horrible there. But we are borderline close to that here in the United States.
And due to all this kind of measure that has been taken on free speech in US,
Yes.
What kind of US do you think would be in the next 5 years, 4 years?
Oh, it's going to be very bad. I myself, I'm on probation for a year. As soon as I'm on probation, I am leaving. Just because I think with already, and that was a big point for Trump during his campaign to get reelected, he was going to bring back free speech. He was saying it was already gone, and just the things that he's done to where he handpicks the reporters at the White House, that he makes sure there is no one there who write anything negative about him.
That's why on day one I signed an executive order banning all government censorship and directing the removal of every bureaucrat who conspired to attack free speech and many other things. And I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal. It makes no difference how big a victory I had. I can have the biggest victory in history. It makes no difference what kind of a failure the other side has. These people are going to go after me.
And just the way it's coming is we are going to have more and more journalists put in jail and legally punished for writing the truth, just because the people with money making donations do not like it.
And that's really, terrible in the sense of the impact it has on so many anonymous lives that we'll never know.
Yes.
And turning to Mahmoud Khalil, like what exactly happened on March 8th? In fact, the case of the Indian student happened one day before.
Yes.
And the story goes on like this, that there were two parallel stories happening. First is that the Indian student Ranjani Srinivasan, who is 37 years old, she was doing her doctorate at Columbia in urban planning.
Yes.
And just one day before 8th March, the ICE immigration control agents came over to her flat asking where she was. She was not there at that point of time. The next day, on 8th of March, Mahmoud Khalil, considers who is born in 1995, so technically is very young, and
Yes.
he calls himself as a double refugee because he was born to Palestinian parents in Syria, and after the Syrian civil war, they had to leave for Lebanon. And there
Yes.
he was working with the British embassy, managing the Chevening Scholarship Program at Beirut.
Exactly. Yes. And that is one thing I really want to touch on, both his background and the Indian students. These are good young adults that they have centered their life on serving other people. And so it's not like he grew up in a training camp in Syria pushing jihad. It's not it at all. He's actually spent his life making sure other students get the same scholarship opportunities he did. And now he has a wife who is 8 months pregnant. There's so much, like you hear a lot of conservative Americans. I heard something on Fox News yesterday where they're trying to understand why he was even at Columbia University, why he lives there, because he's not a student anymore. He's already graduated, but his wife has not. His wife is still a student, and she lives in student housing. That is why they are there. And it's just the way our media twists and turns the smallest details to where they can push their agenda. And now these two just great young adults, their life will never be the same. It doesn't matter where they go, they are going to have to live with these consequences the rest of their life.
Yes, that is, in fact, even in India, when we started doing our MPhil and PhD on Middle East or West Asia, we were categorically informally told that if you pursue the Palestinian issue, you will never get a job in US. And this is like way back in 2012.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you touched on the fact that I am an independent journalist. That is why I am independent, is because no one here will hire me. They all go out of their way to read what I write, but nobody will hire me because I am labeled very pro-Palestinian. And with my arrest, this is another thing that gets so turned around, is they say I support armed resistance. Thing is I won't say I support armed resistance. I just understand why it happens. As long as you have an armed occupation, there's always going to be armed resistance.
Crisis in Middle East, somewhere or the other, stems from the Palestinian question.
Yes.
And till that is solved or even listened to, no crisis will actually ever be organically solved.
No. And see, what you have to understand is, I don't know how familiar you are with the United States history, what happened here in the late 1700s and 1800s and 1900s to Native Americans. But our government can never, ever condemn what Israel is doing, because then we have to answer questions about what we did.
Yes.
You know, we still hear in the United States, especially in the western part of our country, we have quote unquote reservations still today, where these Native Americans were forced to go live when the United States government took their land. That is no different than what we see with the refugee camps over in the West Bank. The only difference is here at these reservations we have, you don't have the armed military monitoring and controlling everyday life 24 hours a day.
Yes.
And it makes no sense. And then we as American citizens want to question why other parts of the world hate us. And it's like, you know what? If you could see what was going on, you would understand. If I was a Palestinian growing up in the West Bank, dealing with America funding all this money to Israel, I would probably hate America too. So
Yeah, but
it's
that's the paradox of, the most of us that even though we are very critical of US, but we would be standing in the line to get the visa.
yes,
So there is no differentiation between Palestinians and Hamas at all.
that's a big problem here, because I have very close friends in Gaza who are not okay with Hamas, and this goes
Yes,
back long before October 7th.
yes.
So that it's collective punishment. Just, that would be like saying all white American men are part of the Ku Klux Klan. So you cannot do that. You cannot collectively group that people that way.
No, that is actually correct in the sense because a lot of Palestinians had been very, very frightened, and in the authoritarian dictatorship of Hamas itself, anything, if they question Hamas, they will be just vanishing from the
Yes.
streets. And Yahya Sinwar, for example, was involved in, nabbing a lot of Palestinians whom he thought had were giving information to Israelis or whatever, and created a lot of
Yes.
atrocities on them. So this kind of differentiation is at all not. Even in most parts, like of the world, it's like the differentiation does not exist.
Yes, but see that is that is mainstream media's way of making the Palestinians evil.
Yes.
Because now Hamas and what happened on October 7th and a few things that have happened before, that they have that categorization of they are evil. And so it works out better for anyone supporting Israel just to say all of these Palestinian people are Hamas. That if you're Palestinian, that means you are Hamas. And that simply is not true.
And one more thing, sir, a lot of those who are supportive of Israel, they state that all these protest movements in Colombia and other universities in US were not organic. They were funded by Qatar.
I've heard a lot of, and you have to remember that I wish I could have been at these protests to report as a journalist, not necessarily take part, but actually when the protests happened, I was in prison watching on TV. And so I remember seeing a few of the protests and thinking, man, this is not good. These kids need to just be quiet and go back to their dorm, because in a sense they did a lot more harm than they did good. I'm all for free speech. I'm all for organized protest, but you have to go about it the right way. And just the way some things were happening, somebody was pumping some money in. And I'll tell you, a lot of people tell you I'm wrong, but I believe that from my personal experience, from what I've seen and different things I picked up on, I think these protests were being funded by pro-Israel groups to paint a bad picture of Palestinian supporters.
That is also very plausible. It is very plausible, actually. And one thing, yeah, because I remember that few of the student protests, they were very pro-Hamas without having any inkling of what Hamas really is.
Yes, and if you listen to a couple of the interviews, you could just tell that they had no idea of what they were talking about.
Exactly.
No.
And one thing also which was missing from that discussion was no one was talking about the Israeli hostages.
Exactly.
The American citizen also who is currently a hostage under Hamas, none of the protesters talked about it.
No, it should have been, there should have been a not as broad of a focus, that they were there just obviously saying anything evil against Israel as they could. And I'm all for that. I'm all for condemning the Israeli government for exactly what they are, which is evil. But at the same time, you have to be able to back what you are saying. And these students, they had no clue. It just, to me, it looked too much like a setup, because anyone who was pro-Palestinian would not been okay with what was being said.
Yes, that is something which was also, and there was it made life difficult for a lot of Arab Americans.
Yes, it did.
It and they were.
I've talked to many Arab Americans, specifically Muslim Arab Americans, who will tell you what has happened since these protests has been very, very similar to what they went through after 9/11.
Yes, yes. That is a certain kind of, counterintuitive impact that was seen, because the binary vision of, I won't say all the students, but few of the student leaders was quite dysfunctional.
Yes. Yeah.
And
It lacked overall organization.
yes. And one thing, sir, which I don't understand is I don't understand Trump's mindset when it comes to Israel. For example, way before Netanyahu went to the White House, Trump had tweeted on Truth Social a video interview of Professor Jeffrey Sachs questioning, who was critical of Netanyahu. Then he calls Netanyahu as a first head of the state to visit him. Then he gives money to Israel. Arms and arsenal deal is fixed. Then again, Steve Witkoff and the Trump team are talking also with Hamas and not telling Israel about it. So,
Yes.
How do you see Steve Witkoff? He's a Jewish businessman, friends with Trump
Yep.
from 1983. How do you see his role? Because no one really talks about Steve Witkoff and the power he has.
And I think a lot of that, because he is part of the Trump administration, we are not going to hear a lot of the details. All we are going to know is what Fox News tells us. That's it. Because Trump, and you have to realize Trump and Netanyahu have always been very close. If you remember, during Trump's last administration, he was the first U.S. president to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv back to Jerusalem, which is something countless American presidents have said they were going to do, but Trump actually did it. And you also have to look at his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who actually was the man behind the Abraham Accords. The money their family makes from other Arab countries normalizing deals with Israel is just unreal. I think Jared Kushner, since the end of Trump's first administration, I'm sure he's made more money than was taken from Columbia University just on making deals between Israel and other Arab countries.
That is, and what I really don't understand is how does because America is also the land where massive protests happened against the Vietnam War,
Yes.
against the apartheid regime in South Africa,
Yes.
the BDS movement.
Yes.
Uh,
And if you look now and see, that's the thing, a lot of these college students currently doing what they are doing for the last year or so, all they know is these protests at UCLA and all this during the Vietnam War. People who led those protests, we consider them heroes. They spoke out and they created a difference. And so these students today think that it's simple, that all they got to do is go grab a bullhorn and get a group of people and they're going to be in history books. And there's not enough in what they're doing, there's not enough organization, because the people in our past throughout the 60s, the 70s, early 80s, they made a huge difference. And that is what we need today in our country. We need American citizens like myself willing to stand for these international students being deported and arrested for speaking up. And I get it. A lot of Americans, the first thing they're going to tell you is American citizens have a right to free speech, not international students on a student visa. And I get so angry when I hear that, because people don't realize the money our government makes from having those students here on a student visa.
Oh, yes.
So in my opinion, their voice is 100% equal to ours. And most of these students add more than we do because of what life is like at home for them. So they know what they are talking about.
Yeah, and that is one thing, because the students also, when they get citizenship or get a job, or if they settle in United States, they make up for most of the labor force of United States.
Yes. And it just is what it is. I'll say it. Not enough Americans will say it. You look at our most prestigious universities, and academically, these international students are the smartest students in our country. They by far score higher on tests, IQ tests. They have the more difficult degrees and concentrations of studies is always their focus. You just go into any doctor's office here in the United States and you see this. You go to any large legal firm with human rights attorneys and whatnot, they are all international student. Were at one time an international student. And so to say these people do not have the same rights that we do is just so completely degrading. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that everybody's spitting this foul rhetoric out of their mouth are these far-right conservative Americans.
That was because they get more courage and audacity to speak their mind.
Yeah, they finally have their man in office now, so they think they get to say whatever they want, but no one else does.
And I also don't understand that Trump said that he will end all wars, and today, like yesterday, US time, he bombed the Houthis. In which there are actually 31 killed and there are hundreds of injured, mostly women and children. How does he plan to end all wars when he starts one?
The thing you got to remember about Donald Trump is he just says so much nonsense that I don't even think he realizes what he said until the end of the day when he sits down to think about everything. And I don't know if you can tell, I've got a Yemeni flag back here on my wall. I'd be careful with this because the Houthis are now designated terrorist group. But as far as the people of Yemen, I love the Yemeni people. They are the poorest country in the world.
Yes.
And they support Palestine 1,000%. Will do anything they can to support Palestinians because they know the truth of what is happening.
And the most, yes, sir.
Yeah, no, and I'm real big on, you know what? Yes, there are some people who in Yemen who are some very bad people who need to be dealt with. There are some people in Gaza who are some very bad people who need to be dealt with. There are some people in Syria, but there's also people here in the United States that are some very bad people and need to be dealt with.
That is, in fact, it's very necessary to understand the difference between, and now it is getting even much more clearer when the difference between the state and the citizens is widening in most of the countries. And what really I found very weird was also that the refueling of the American aircrafts was done through most of the Gulf countries
Yes.
that attacked the Houthis.
Yes. And that's something you have to understand about what is going on with the maritime in the waters there, what the Houthis are doing. That they're not just saying we're going to kill Israelis, we're going to kill Americans. What they're doing in targeting these cargo ships is they're targeting anyone sending goods to the Israeli government. So there's a method between what the in just like some of the college students, they might be going about it the wrong way, but what they're doing, it's not just, oh, there's a boat, shoot a gun, that they are targeting specifically ships and cargo supporting the Israeli government that funds what is happening in Gaza.
Yes.
That is their whole deal in the blockade in Gaza, and we're done. You just let them get the food, water, and aid they need, and we're out. You never hear from us again.
It's
and
more than 15 days.
Yeah, yes.
Without electricity, without water, without food, without medical supplies.
That's the stuff that not enough Americans hear. All Americans hear is, oh, well, the Houthis shot a rocket at one of our boats. Let's go get them. No, that's not what it is. It's the Houthis are taking a stand so people get what they need to survive. You cannot live without food, water, and electricity. That's what all this is about.
And it is going to take more than 15 years to rebuild Gaza.
Oh, definitely. In this, the Egyptians put a group together with an incredible plan. This crazy idea that President Trump had just is complete nonsense. But I really hope what the Egyptians have proposed with them getting more involved in Gaza, because I mean, they're right there, their borders meet.
Yeah.
To have more Arab countries get involved with rebuilding. And you know that's what you got to realize is Hamas did what they did. And I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to say I support October 7th, because I don't. I don't. But members of Hamas and people in Gaza have been begging the world to get involved since 1948. And the world does nothing.
Yes.
And so when you have begged the international community to come to your rescue and they won't, your only option is to fight yourself. And when the United States did it, before we were even the United States in 1774 and 75 and 76, when our colonial freedom fighters did it, it was okay. But if Palestinians do it, they're terrorists.
And also the entire history of Irgun, Hagana, Lehi, that is not talked about in terms of terrorism, but Hamas is. And Netanyahu played a pivotal role in actually allowing the funds to strengthen Hamas.
Yes, and I'm not going to say anything because that is one thing I guarantee you. As soon as I share this video after you send me the YouTube, the FBI will see it. They comb my social media very, very carefully, and that's okay. I know it's going to happen, so I'm okay with it. But I encourage anyone to actually do some research on how Hamas was created. Hamas was a weapon created by Israel to combat the Palestinian government in the West Bank.
Yep.
The Palestinian Authority. And Israel helped create something that they lost control of. Let's not forget that it's been over a year, about a year and a half. Israel is supposed to be one of the most powerful nations in the world, and they still have not defeated Hamas. These are resistance fighters running around in flip-flops.
Yeah.
And Israel cannot win. So when's it over? When does it end? That they created this lie that the goal of what they're doing is to exterminate Hamas. You've proven you can't do that. So when does the genocide and ethnic cleansing end?
I do not think so that the goal is to end it, because it would be a
No.
loss to the military industrial complex and private security contractors
Yes.
in terms of monetary benefits that they raise. Also, what I often think about how it feels to be an Israeli citizen, because constantly there are sirens going on 24
Yes.
hours.
Yes.
You have to stay in safe houses, in
Yep.
bunkers,
Bomb shelters.
bomb
Yes.
shelters, and the cost of living has gone high.
Yes. Their tourism is very, very
Very low.
down.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, as soon as this war on Gaza is over, Netanyahu goes on trial.
He is, yes.
As long as there is a war, he is not on trial.
Yes.
As soon as the war's over, that starts. So of course he wants to drag this out as long as he can.
And the reason which also disturbs me is because there are a lot of Orthodox Jews who do not believe in Zionism.
Yes.
There are a lot of family members of the hostages who are protesting day and night.
Yep. Yes.
And the kind of social welfare or cohesion or the social contract within Israel is also not suitable. Yoav Gallant actually went ahead and met with the hostage family members, not Netanyahu, initially.
No. Because they would hurt Netanyahu. Him and several of his ministers, the Itamar Ben-Gvir, who recently stepped down, the Ben Smotrich.
Yes.
The three of them are popular with Israeli settlers, but as far as the people of Israel, that they are not liked at all.
It is very difficult to speak truth to power.
Yes.
It is very difficult to, because often we are categorized as propagandists when we speak about the truth.
Exactly.
There are fractions within, there is hierarchy, there are a lot of divisions within the Palestinians themselves. There is corruption,
Yes.
there is nepotism, but at the same time, nothing can be defended in the name of ethnic cleansing or genocide.
Yes. And anyone interested, I highly encourage anyone that just wants to know what's going on, do your research. Follow pro-Palestinian writers and journalists. Follow Israeli writers and journalists. And keep in mind that all this started long before October 7th.
Yes.
October 7th was a build-up for years. Actually, what October 7th happened because what had been happening the 6 weeks before in Jerusalem and Al-Quds in the West Bank with women worshipers trying to get into Al-Aqsa Mosque. There were several things that led up to October 7th. So do your history and your research, and you will see what has been happening since before 1948, because you touched on it. The state of Israel, founded in 1948, was not a Jewish movement. It was a Zionist movement, and not enough people know what Zionism is. It's not a religion, it is political.
Yes. And what I would like to tell the students is that if you're confused, because confusion is the best form of control, but anyone who is watching it, I would just want to say that if you don't know what or who you are, the world will tell you. So
Yes.
it's important that you learn, unlearn, and relearn who you are, falsify whatever you think is not correct, have the ability to question. But what is the most important thing at the end of the day is to be true to yourselves.
Yes, yes. That's why for me, doing exactly what you just said, because I spent a lot of times by myself in prison in a cell for a year thinking about that. And I got out of prison and I didn't know if I was going to cover the West Bank anymore. And when I did exactly what you just mentioned, when I was willing to take a look at who I really am and what makes me and what I believe, I can't stay quiet. I have to say something. I believe that is part of the reason why I was created and am here, is specifically to talk about this.
But at an honest level, I do not believe in boycotting Israelis. So we also invite a lot of Israeli scholars to speak,
Yes,
and they need to speak their side of the story also.
yes, yes,
And that is, we called Mao Zedong, we called Faniao Salzburger, or if Naiman, many, and many in US itself who are Jewish. So, and those who are working for West Bank.
yes.
So
Yeah,
the idea, yeah, because without dialogue, there can be no understanding.
exactly. Just like there are a lot of amazing Palestinians stuck in the middle, there are some amazing Israel. I actually, before I started covering the West Bank, I was on staff with the Jerusalem Post. I was the
Wow,
first person on their full-time staff who did not have at least a bachelor's degree at the time.
wow,
And it was when I went to work for Jerusalem Post and started seeing what was happening, I was like, hey, no way. I can't be a part of this.
yeah,
And I quit my job that day and went to work for the Arab American News.
yeah.
So we need to hear what they had to say also. That is, you cannot make an honest decision on yourself of what you believe without hearing both sides of the story.
Yeah, and tides are changing. For example, I don't know what is the intensity of this change, but even Imad Muna and Mahmoud Muna, the bookshop owners in Jerusalem who were raided second time, 2 days back he was on BBC World Service Radio, which is a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
thing.
Yes, and they're just. I think one thing that, of course, now we can't say this as openly in the United States, but social media and independent journalism has made great advances this last
Yeah,
10 years. There's stuff that without independent journalism and social media, nobody would, all you would know is what Fox News or CNN tells you, or BBC or these other major mainstream
yeah,
publications.
yeah,
In everything they say, 100%, there is a political agenda behind.
yes, yes.
So it's independent journalism and social media has opened up the eyes of the world to what is happening in more places than one.
One thing which I also want to tell you a joke that the Indian government need not do anything about Ranjani Srinivasan because her Indian parents will actually, thrash her when she gets back. This is what this, like. What did you do? That that is
Yes.
going to happen to her sadly.
We are given to understand through media reports that this particular individual, he has been detained. Neither the US government nor this individual has approached us or the embassy. So this is what we understand. The other student you talked about, see, we have spoken on this issue on several occasions in the past, that when it comes to visa and immigration policy, it is something that lies within the sovereign functions of a country. We, on our side, we expect that when we have foreign nationals coming to India, they abide by our laws and regulations. And similarly, it is our expectation that when Indian nationals are abroad, they must also comply with local laws and regulations.
I was like just thinking about it, that where is from the frying pan to that kind of situation.
Yeah, it is sad. Like I said, her, and there was also a young Palestinian woman arrested.
Yes, yes. There's
What was
another.
her?
There is.
Cordia.
I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
Laka
Palestinian.
Cordia. She's from the West Bank, and they said her her student visa had expired,
Yeah.
but she also was arrested last April at a protest. And
Yeah.
I also, especially with your audience, it needs to be, not enough people in the U.S. are talking about this. The Indian student who self-deported, the U.S. officials have failed to provide their evidence against her for advocating violence.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
There's no
they've not.
criminal evidence against her.
Yes. So
I understand.
it is what it is. But I want people to know that this young woman from India, who now her life is going to be destroyed.
It is.
They can't prove what they are saying about her.
Yeah, they can't prove it. It's just like her. She was not. She was. There were two charges against her. One was that she was involved in the traffic congestion or whatever, and the second was she was involved in the campus protests. She was not involved in the campus protests at all last year. There was no evidence regarding it. Her home or residency is near the area where the protest took place. Secondly, even if she was, how can without evidence any trial be done?
Yes, and I didn't go enough into it, but I guess she has also studied at, it was either Harvard or
Yes.
Yale.
Yeah.
I mean, this young woman is very, very smart.
She's
So I want
37 years old. Her entire life is ahead of
Yeah,
us.
I want to say, being that smart, she would not have done something to jeopardize what the opportunity she had. She's done lots of work in Washington, D.C. She's been very involved in New York City. So, I mean, her life, it would just never be the same now. And everything she was doing was about serving other people.
That is
she was not going to make a lot of money doing what she was going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, her focus was making life better for other people.
Yes, and
now
her
she had to
areas
leave
of
the United States.
Yeah, it is a matter of, like, the smartest pay the highest price sometimes because of their own bravery. But everyone pays. There's always a consequence. There's consequence of not taking an action. There's a consequence of taking an action, because there is always one can always silence many voices around you, but you cannot silence your own voice of your conscience.
Exactly. That is what you deal with every time you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much, sir.